Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're getting hyper-local, folks. Really hyper-local. We're zeroing in on Bourbonnais and diving headfirst into a treasure trove of meeting minutes from village committees spanning March to September 2024.
We're talking your personal time capsule of local government here.
Exactly. And our mission, should we choose to accept it, which we have, is to unearth those golden nuggets, the stuff that truly resonates with you, our amazing listeners.
Think of it as your news, but straight from the source. We cut through the noise and bring you the facts, along with what they actually mean for you.
Love it. And one thing that practically leaps off these pages is the sheer volume of development happening. Building permits are through the roof. Home values are soaring. Bourbonnais is booming.
And when we talk booming, we got to talk about PSI construction. They're expanding big time, going beyond their initial agreement in the Bourbonnais Parkway area. Now, this has implications beyond just one company's growth.
Right. It makes you think about the potential ripple effects.
Yeah.
Property values, traffic patterns.
Exactly. And here's where things get really interesting. The minutes hint that PSI might actually end up building a public road as part of this whole expansion.
Oh, and a private company building a public road?
That's what caught my eye, too. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on how that unfolds. But while we're on the topic of development and maybe a little controversy, let's talk about St. Paul's Lutheran Church and their quest for solar panels.
Oh, yeah, this one's generating some buzz around town. Some folks are all for it, love the church going green, but others, not so much. Concerns about how it'll look in a residential neighborhood, potential impacts on property values, even the whole long-term environmental benefits of solar panels are up for debate.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, St. Paul's is looking at this massive electric bill, somewhere between $85,000 and $100,000 annually. These solar panels, they estimate a savings of about $1.5 million over their lifespan.
Wow, that's a whole lot of savings. Makes you understand why they're considering it. And to their credit, they're trying to be sensitive to those aesthetic concerns, Talking about tucking the panels away in the northeast corner of their property, screening them with a 6-foot fence, maybe some arborvitae trees, those tall, kind of skinny evergreen trees.
It's a real balancing act, trying to move forward with progress while still preserving the look and feel of a neighborhood.
It really is. Okay, ready for a change of pace? Let's dive into everyone's favorite topic, money. And where better to do that than the Finance Committee minutes? They're a gold mine of information about the village budget.
And the good news is the village ended the fiscal year in the black, a surplus. Always a good indicator of responsible financial stewardship. However...
There's always a however, right? There's got to be something.
There is some areas where spending is a bit higher than projected. Police department overtime, for example, really jumped out. The village is working on hiring new officers, but until those positions are filled, it's overtime to cover those shifts.
Which begs the question, is the police force equipped to handle a growing community? Something to ponder, folks.
Definitely. And speaking of finances, we can't overlook those ARPA funds. Remember that federal money that came through? Well, these minutes, they give us a peek into how it's being spent.
Park upgrades, new police officers, infrastructure projects, it's all there. It's like a wish list.
I'd call it more of a strategic plan, really. These decisions, both big and small, reveal what truly matters to the village.
I like that strategic plan. It's like peeking behind the curtain. Speaking of which, here's a little detail I found fascinating. The village is replacing an old public works truck. 30 years old, this thing. They're even going to auction it off.
It's a glimpse into those day-to-day operations that keep a town ticking. We don't think about it much until, say, the garbage truck doesn't roll up on its usual day, right?
Exactly. And speaking of things that affect our wallets, remember, the grocery tax. Kiss it goodbye. The village is eliminating it.
Sounds like a win at first glance, right? But hold your applause. That grocery tax was a pretty substantial revenue stream for the village. So naturally, this begs the question, now what?
They've got to fill that gap somehow, right? And here's where it gets interesting. They're considering, get this, a new tax on dot parking lots.
Now, don't go picturing parking meters popping up everywhere you look. This tax would primarily target businesses, not us regular folks. But it does highlight the tough choices local governments face when trying to balance services with keeping taxes in check.
For sure. Speaking of balancing priorities, the Finance Committee isn't exactly handing out sponsorships like candy. They gave the green light to the BBCHS football team, but other organizations, not so lucky.
It's more than just doling out money, wouldn't you say? These decisions reflect the values of the village.
Absolutely. So we've got development booming, money flowing in and out, but what are people really buzzing about? Well, The Community and Economic Development Committee minutes give us a glimpse into those conversations.
And let me tell you, change is definitely in the air. And as we all know, change often stirs up a bit of debate. And we see this playing out in discussions about garage sale regulations, variance requests, even a certain old fence that's causing quite a stir.
Let's start with those garage sales, shall we? The village is cracking down on enforcing those regulations, especially when it comes to unregistered sales. They've rolled out some new rules, including, and I found this interesting, a fee for your very first permit.
It's all about transparency, really, ensuring everyone's on the same page, following the rules. Of course, some folks might argue it's a bit much for something as simple as a garage sale.
I'm sure. And speaking of things that ignite debate, there's a variance request for a multifamily residence over on Route 45 that got people talking.
This is a textbook example of those small-scale decisions that can set off ripple effects throughout a whole neighborhood. The developer, they wanted to reduce the front yard setback, which on the one hand, allows for greater density, but on the other hand could change the character of the area, maybe even lead to concerns about traffic, parking, property values, that sort of thing.
And then, of course, we've got the great Marcotte Park fence saga. Now, this might seem like a small thing, right? But it highlights those challenges the village faces when trying to maintain its infrastructure.
Absolutely. We've got this aging fence that's seen better days. Some residents want it gone, others are perfectly fine with it. But then you add in the cost of replacing it, which, let's face it, falls on the taxpayers, and suddenly a simple fence turns into a much bigger conversation.
It's those unintended consequences, right? One little thing snowballing into something much bigger.
Exactly. It's never as simple as it seems on the surface.
So what's the takeaway for you, our amazing listeners? It's that even seemingly small issues can become flashpoints for larger discussions about what we value as a community, how our resources are allocated, and ultimately what we envision for the future of Bourbonnais.
And the good news is these minutes, they clearly show that residents are paying attention. They're showing up at meetings, they're speaking their minds, participating in that public comment process, making their voices heard.
And speaking of community involvement, we've got to talk about the new community campus. It's officially up and running, already drawing families in with events like Food Truck Fridays and those outdoor movie nights. Always a hit.
It's a phenomenal investment in recreation and family-friendly fun, and a testament to what can happen when people work together. The village, the park district, local organizations, they all joined forces to bring this to life.
I love that.
Yeah.
And okay, I have to share this little detail from the minutes because it tickled me, apparently. Kids keep hitting the emergency button at the splash pad.
You gotta love those little moments, right? They remind us that we're not just dealing with spreadsheets and agendas here, we're dealing with real people.
Absolutely. Okay, before we move on to our final thoughts, let's touch on those essential services that keep our lives running smoothly. Public works, police, and utilities.
The public works folks have been keeping busy with park improvements, road repairs, all those ongoing projects that keep a town ticking, right? Like they're sprucing up the pavilion at Cobblestone Park and continuing the work over at Hayes Park.
Keeping busy indeed. And of course, there's always something happening with the police, right? Community events like National Night Out, new officers being sworn in. It's all in the minutes.
It's reassuring to see the village prioritizing a strong police presence, especially as the community grows.
I agree. And last but not least, we can't forget those all-important utility updates, trash pickup schedules, those pesky holiday closures, all the things that keep our lives running smoothly.
It's amazing how these little updates, the trash pickup schedules and such, they really impact our daily lives, don't they?
It's easy to take it all for granted, right, until that garbage truck doesn't show up.
Yeah.
But yet, these minutes, they really give us a peek behind the curtain.
They do. And you know what I find fascinating? It's not just about what's happening, but the conversations, the debates that go on behind the scenes.
Totally. It's like we get to eavesdrop on the community, hear what's on people's minds, what they're excited about, what worries them, what they envision for their town.
That's what makes this so interesting, wouldn't you say? It's not just about dry facts and figures. It's about real people, real lives.
100%. And speaking of real people, going through these minutes, it's those little details, those human moments that really stuck with me. Remember that resident who specifically thanked the police department for doing a vacation watch while they were out of town?
It's those glimpses into everyday life that make these documents so relatable, reminds us that we're not just talking about some abstract policy, but decisions that impact people, their lives, their families, their homes.
Absolutely. Or how about that little tidbit about kids constantly hitting the emergency button at the splash pad. I mean, come on. You gotta laugh at that one, right?
You gotta love it. Proof that even with the best planning, a little chaos is inevitable, especially when you throw kids into the mix.
Ain't that the truth? But on a more serious note, going back to that idea of community involvement, I think these minutes really highlight how residents are tuned in. They're engaged in the process, making their voices heard.
100%. We see it in their comments, their questions, those lively debates. Residents are showing up at these meetings, speaking their minds, and that's huge.
It is. Because at the end of the day, a town is more than just buildings and budgets, right? It's the people. In these minutes, they give us a glimpse into how those people are shaping their community.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these Bourbonnais Village Committee minutes, I'm curious what stands out to you, what surprised you, anything that really resonated.
You know, it's funny.
Yeah.
These minutes, they're about local government, right? Budgets, ordinances, all that.
Right.
But they really paint this picture of Bourbonnais.
They do.
You can practically feel the energy, the
That
excitement.
passion, yeah.
Exactly. And that's what I'm hoping you take away from this deep dive. It's bigger than just zoning changes and budget numbers, you know? It's about a town that's growing, that's changing, and in how those decisions being made today, they'll shape what Bourbonnais becomes.
And that's a story that you are a part of.
Exactly.
Whether you've been here forever or just moved in, your voice, your perspective, it matters in all this.
Absolutely. And these meeting minutes, they're more than just a record of what's happened. They're a sneak peek at what's coming next.
Yeah.
What's been talked about, what decisions have been made, but also where you can get involved, where you can make your voice heard.
Because let's be real, the future of Bourbonnais, it's not something that just happens to people.
Right.
It's something that all of us create together. And these minutes, they give you the tools, the knowledge to be a part of that.
So as we wrap things up here, I want to leave you with this. Think about everything we've covered today. The development, the budget stuff, those conversations happening in the community. What sticks with you? What gets you fired up? Whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. What do you want to see in Bourbonnais? What's your vision?
Because the Bourbonnais story isn't over yet. It's still being written
No.
in that next chapter. That's all of us.
Could have said it better myself. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and